The screen is, what's funny is that the adult viewer of a kid with a screen, we can't see what's going on in the kid's mind. And so the alarmists have us scared that these kids' brains are melting between their ears. Even though it's the most preposterous idea, with just a moment of thought. Like, we use our phones all day long to do work, to interact with our friends, to learn about the world, right? My phone, I rarely even use my laptop. My phone is extraordinary. Like, my quality of life is just, so I'm talking to you, for Christ's sake.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that there's a lot going on here, that our brains are not just melting, even though some people convince themselves that they're addicted to their phones. Again, it's complete nonsense.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Through Conversations podcast. Perhaps this will be one of the most controversial yet engaging episodes ever from the podcast. I'm here with Aaron Stupple. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Alex.
It's an honor and it's a privilege because your book is unlike any that I've read. Of course, I might not be right there in your ballpark in terms of niche. I don't have kids yet, although I'm planning in my life to have them. I keep joking that I want to have like 10, hopefully, because we need more soldiers in the world. But your book is so counterintuitive, The Sovereign Child, and it makes me think about not only myself, but also, all people. How can they really honor their time on Earth? How can they unleash their potential, especially in the modern age of AI, of technology, sense of agency? So it's more than just a parenting book. It's really like how, should humans unfold in their best way possible. But let me bring it back a bit.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Oreos. I ate Oreos like crazy, Aaron.
There we go.
And one day I ate a whole pack, 16 of them before my soccer game. And I took a nap automatically. It wasn't like my fault. My body just shut down.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I woke up bringing everything, the Oreos, back into nature. And that was like a gem of wisdom for myself. Like, I don't want Oreos no more. I'm going to take a pause. So am I tapping into some of your themes on The Sovereign Child here? Did something happen within me that, talks about not self-enforcing, not enforcing from the outside? Alex shouldn't eat Oreos. It's just, let's explore what happens when Alex eats 16 Oreos.
Right. Well, absolutely. I mean, Oreo cookies and so many things get treated like they are either good or bad in themselves. And I think what we have not good theories about, bad theories about, is how our own minds think about, everything in life, and, how we think about food, what our relationship with food is. And these things get reduced down to, what are the constituents of the food, right? And what are the outcomes of this and that behavior. And we kind of damp down this very rich inner process that's going on with everything, even with mundane things like junk food, or what we pay attention to, or how we sleep. What's really happening is that there is a constant process of knowledge generation going on in the mind all the time. And an Oreo cookie is not just about the Oreo. It's about everything else that's going on as well. So in your case, right, a soccer game, right? There's a soccer game. I'm guessing you're probably a teenager at that time, maybe. There's other things in a teenager's life. There is, was this after school, or was this on a tournament day, right? Like the relationship of an Oreo cookie is so different in all those different contexts. Is this breakfast? Is this, an Oreo cookie after dinner? Are you on a, cross-country car trip? Mm-hmm. Are you in the woods and you're starving and you happen upon some junk food? Like, so you can't just make rules about Oreo cookies. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And instead, it's the mind constantly figuring out, how does the Oreo cookie fit in with all of the other things that I'm interested in, all the other things that I want to eat and do, etc. It fits in with, what do I see myself as? Am I in tune with nature and natural foods and natural products and processes, and I don't like artificial dyes and compounds and things like that? And other people don't care about that stuff at all. And there's a whole host of reasons going on all the time. And to just simply reduce this down to junk food or good food or bad food or whatever, I think that is the big mistake. With adults and with kids. And it's particularly bad with kids because kids they're kind of doing two things. One, they're learning about the world, what Oreo cookies taste like, how do they make you feel after you eat 16 of them in a row. So they're learning about all that stuff, but they're also learning how to fit it together with everything else that they care about. And they can only fit it in according to what they care about. They don't have, there's not like a kid has some alternative framework that they're going to fit it in. Like a parent says, here's, Oreo cookies are bad, they go way down here. And, carrots are much better, they go up higher. And hummus is good too. And, right. And getting enough water, but juice is bad. But, 50% orange juice, that's better. A kid can't adopt somebody else's framework. They can only work with what they understand about things. So Oreo cookies fit in somewhere. So what I'm saying is kids are learning two things at once. They're learning about the world, and they're also learning how to organize their own set of priorities. And they're learning that they themselves are the person. They're the agent who selects what matters right now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to interrupt this episode. I have a huge announcement that I'll be sharing with you just now. My first book ever is out now, called The Time Is Now, a guide to honor your time on Earth. This was a 2-year project that's been in the works. It's a tough love guide to honor your time on Earth. This book will show you how to reclaim your time and energy for what truly matters. Click the link in the show notes and you're gonna see also the link to the domain here, timeisnowbook.com. Order a copy for your loved ones, and I'm so excited for you to dive into it. Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, we can see we're already deep in, right? And it's not and so you get the idea that the book is written about kids, but it applies absolutely to adults in any age.
We're deep in, and we're gonna get deeper for sure. Because my favorite chapter has been the one when you talk about the philosophy behind all of this. Not only the practice, but the philosophy. And let's get deep into it.
Great.
It's Aaron, it's one of my core fears when I get to have a child or multiple childs, God willing, is something I kept asking myself while reading your book is, I'm, and you also begin this in your preface in your book. You say like the way you were raised, perhaps didn't necessarily come into, with these no rules enforced, on maybe the contrary. And also for my case, this is not to rip our parents at all. It's quite the contrary, is to honor them, is to challenge, to create new iterations of how our kids should be raised in future generations. That being said, I was raised with rules. I was raised with this framework of how should a kid be raised and how should we enforce rules and what's good and what's bad. And my moral compass is completely driven by that, by my own experience. And the deepest fear is, how do I know if I'm thinking for myself? And how can I make sure, if I don't know that answer for myself, how am I able to translate that to my kids? How can I let them think for themselves? And that's like my biggest paradox, right? Like I get the ideas, but how can I make sure that my own hand, like my no intervention, is really a no intervention? If I'm making sense, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I say is there's definitely intervention. It's not like you have to be terrified, I would say anyway. And again, these are all just suggestions. I'm not I make declarative statements as if
Yeah.
just for convenience to be clear, but raise your kids the way you want to raise your kids. My view on this would be that I'm very involved in what my kids are doing. I'm intervening all the time. And the question is, what is an intervention that thwarts or blocks their own process of understanding?
Hmm.
And in all those cases, um, preserving their own agency, their own autonomy, their own sovereignty is an indicator. It's a criterion of whether or not you are thwarting them or not. So like, I'm guessing you intervene with your friends, right? Like you interact with your friends.
Yeah.
What kind of interaction with your friend is an intervention? If you call them on the phone, you're kind of intervening, right? You're getting involved in their day. You're disrupting their day. If you invite them out for dinner, you're dumping an obligation on them to spend time with you instead of somebody else, right? So, I guess what I'm kind of picking apart the meaning of the word intervene,
Hmm.
and I would say thwarting them or blocking them or substituting your will or your agenda for theirs, and that is hard. How do you interact with somebody without doing that? And the fortunate thing is that we have models for this, and that's how we interact with our friends and our, adult family members, our spouses, our partners, siblings. How do you? A great example is, if your brother and your father are having a fist fight
Mhm.
in the living room, are you not going to intervene? Your elderly father is getting pounded by your brother. Or, I would jump up and separate them physically, right? I would intervene, but I would do it. I wouldn't sit there and declare that, hey, my way is the right way, and brother, you were wrong about this, and dad, you were right, and you need to. Right, I wouldn't start lecturing them and condescending to them about as if I understood better than they did, and that I was the one who was taking charge in this situation. Um, and so it's a tricky thing, right? It's often a tricky thing to not step on someone's toes, but we also have a lot of practice with it and experience with our adults in our lives, and I try to um, use those same techniques with my kids. And this is one of the biggest criticisms is that kids aren't your friends. Kids aren't the same as adults. And it's true, they're not the same as adults, but just tabling that for now, the process of interacting with somebody without blocking their own agency, that's the same practice that we use with adults in our lives. And so in the book, I I describe a litmus test. How can you tell if you are, whatever you're doing with your kid, how can you make sure that you're not thwarting them or coercing them is another commonly used word. These are kind of trigger words.
Yeah.
Once you use the word coerce or force with parenting, people have very strong opinions, but it's a great litmus test. So there's lots of examples of people who say, and I just hear this all the time, I'm all for it. I'm all for more freedom with your kids. I'm a big defender, a big promoter of freedom and agency and autonomy. Almost nobody says that those are bad ideas,
Mhm.
right? Nobody says that they're opposed to that. Everybody wants that for their kids. And then they just sit back and say, but in certain circumstances, I have to take charge. In certain circumstances, this is not allowed. Or that's not allowed. And what the typical way that people address that is they come up with some kind of trickery or kind of subtle manipulation. They say, to promote choice for my kids, I'll limit to them to the options that I think are appropriate, but they can choose within those options, right? That sounds very reasonable. You can have, 4 different things for dinner. So look, I'm providing, and you could choose, but you can't choose Oreos or ice cream. So that's just one example. There's lots of these kinds of things that sound very reasonable. And the way that you can check yourself is just imagine doing that with your spouse. Just like, I don't like there's things that I don't like that my spouse eats, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if that's such a great idea. There's lots of things that she does that I'm like, I don't think that's such a great idea. But it would be completely preposterous. She would notice it in a second if I said, okay, I'm going to give you a limited range of choices. She'd be like, why do you get to decide what my limited range of choices are? So that's what I think. I think I'm encouraging to be involved with your kids. This is not a hands-off approach, but how do you be involved without thwarting your kid? Try to just reimagine whatever your mode of interaction is. Just try to imagine that with your spouse and imagine what he or she would say.
Wow, yeah, and it reminds me of another idea from another thinker, Kapil Gupta. He's actually has been kind of like the life coach, you could say. He wouldn't like that word, but from Naval.
Mm-hmm.
Naval and Kapil work together a lot. In one of his books, he says that you should treat your kids as strangers, as total strangers. And I believe it kind of resonates with your ideas that you're learning from them as much as they're learning from you. And how come you're not going to allow them to unleash their true colors while putting these constraints and these rules that you really argue in the book are kind of, they're not laws of nature, it's not like gravity.
Right.
All of these rules that we've created that are kind of based on the modern research, quote unquote, but and we take away the anecdotes, right? The anecdotal success stories, or those who not a lot of people who have a ton of success. I think about the restaurants, right? When you go to a nice restaurant, if you're going to tell your friends about it word by mouth, but the people who go and rate a 1-star review, perhaps on your book or on the restaurant, you have that phase. That's the evidence, right? But not the one on the undercurrent. And so how do you think about this idea of how much can we learn from our kids if we treat them as, they are an extension of ourselves, and it's impossible not to have that kinship and that affection. And that in itself, how does that unfold into building that trust with your kids? Because I also feel that's part of the core of your message is trust comes first and everything unfolds. It's not, it doesn't stop. It's not a manipulation game. They're being raised through your example, and your example should be the best.
Yeah. So yes, trust, I think, is the ultimate, maybe not the ultimate. It's the thing that the rules-based parenting approach doesn't, I don't think, account for. They're worried about all sorts of bad things happening, right? When you're focusing on outcomes, right? The kid's got to can't eat Oreos because it's bad for health, and needs to go to school because they got to learn to read and do math so it can be successful in the world and all these things. So you're very focused on all these outcomes, but what about how much a kid trusts their parent? And what do rules do to trust? Particularly, rules require surveillance, constant surveillance and constant judgment. Even when things are going well, even when the kid is happily complying, they know. It's like working with your boss, to say in the book, right? Like if you have to work in the same office with your boss, that just changes everything, right? You're just constantly aware of what you're doing. Even if everything is going well, it's more stressful and anxiety provoking. And especially with a child, when you're working with someone who's imposing rules, the reason why the rules are imposed is because the kid doesn't understand, right? If the kid understood about cavities and the importance of maintaining your teeth, then they would brush their teeth like every adult does. And if they understood, just go down the list. Running out in the street, right? Like adults don't just go run out and play in the street. They know about cars and the consequences of being struck by moving objects. So if the kid understood, they wouldn't need the rules. And so the rule's always there because the kid does not understand. And so therefore, from the kid's perspective, if they don't understand, then that means the rule comes out of the blue. It comes out of nowhere. If they understood where it was coming from, right, again, they wouldn't understand. The example I use in the book is like a parking ticket. When an adult gets a parking ticket, they know about cars and parking spaces, and there's limited spaces, and you can't just put your car anywhere. When you go into town, you have to put it in a designated space, and if you break the rules, well, they have to invoke penalties, and they use fines to do that, and you go to traffic court and the whole thing, right? Like adults get it. So and when the parking meter parking attendant gives you the ticket, they don't say, now you've been a bad boy. They just put the ticket on and say, sorry. They might, with a big smile say, oh, here's a ticket, good luck with that. They might even give you instructions on how to pay the fine, right? So, whereas a kid, they don't understand why the Oreos taste good. I'm hungry. I eat food, but this food is no good. And that food is good. And I don't really get why. Even if they can explain back to the parent what the parent's explanation is, they still don't really get it. There's a lot to understanding besides just the words and the terms. So anyway, the point is that when a person is receiving a rule that they don't understand, it's going to seem arbitrary. It's going to seem like it comes out of the blue. And so a rule enforcer, someone who imposes rules on a kid, will seem to the kid to be untrustworthy. It's someone you're going to be anxious about, and you're not going to be necessarily fully open and forthright with that person. You're going to be a little bit guarded and on edge. I don't share everything with my boss because I share everything with my friend or with my spouse, because those people are not trying to control me. They are not judging me. They are my my deep trusted relationships. And so I think with your parent, holy moly, as a kid, like you want to, the kid, whatever a kid wants, the parent wants the kid to be fully trusting, fully open, not nervous about some arbitrary rule coming down on them and limiting them in some way, depriving them of some food that they want, Oreo cookies, or taking away an iPad or whatever it is. So I just think having a guarded relationship with a parent is damaging. And you look at all these outcomes that rules are important for: health, education, etc. And I'm not saying those are not important. All I'm saying is that parental trust goes in there and might outweigh all the rest, because the parental trust is how you fix mistakes or troubles, right? You want your parent to be there to help you if you're having trouble eating, right? If you're getting overweight, right? It'd be nice to have somebody who can help. If you're falling behind in school, or you're, whatever trouble you're having, if you're not, doing well with friends, if you're having trouble with career, etc., you want that trusted, open relationship with somebody who understands you and cares about you. So that's one big part of it, is the trust preserving. The other part of your question, though, I'll push back on, is that we learn from our kids. I think that's a little bit of, I don't know what the right word is, but kind of sensationalizing the wisdom of kids. I think kids are ignorant. They don't have wisdom. They are helpless, little kids anyway. They are helpless, ignorant, and I'm not learning much from them. I'm learning about the world and about kids in general and how, young minds function, but it's not like they're guiding me, or it's a two-way street in that regard. It's really a one-way street in the sense that I am keeping them alive. I am supporting their understanding. I am teaching them. And what they are is extraordinarily good at learning. They're not so much wise, but they are incredibly good at learning, and they don't have the hangups that adults have. Adults are often insecure. They're kind of ashamed or embarrassed about their new ideas. They are often in the thrall to authorities and experts, and if they're not an expert, then they don't respect themselves as. So I think kids are free of a lot of the hangups that adults are burdened with, unfortunately, unnecessarily. But they are also ignorant, and they're not really teaching us. But interacting with them, it's crucial to understand from their perspective how they're understanding things. My whole goal is to try to guess what their understanding of this is and see how I can support that. What's their understanding of teeth brushing, and why are they not brushing their teeth? Is it because they don't like the taste of the toothpaste or the feel of the tooth? Like, what's going on in their head? What do they think of me when I make this suggestion,
Mm.
right? If they're fighting with their brother and I jump in and break it up, what are they going to guess about me and my intentions, right? And how is that going to kind of confuse this? So it's respecting them as a learner, but it's not really as a partner, and that we're both in this together, and that it's a I'm learning from them.
Yeah. I guess that to explain what I meant a bit more is not lessons in terms of wisdom, in terms of like intellectual wisdom, or in terms of just they know more about life, but more how they engage with the world, and how I lost that along the way, in being present, in being
Yep.
the freedom to explore the world, as you write, discover and pursue passions, waste time even, playing and
Right.
daydreaming. It's that tapping into that inner sense of life is more about the exploration of the self and the enjoyment, and then everything becomes everything solves itself, and in the best way possible, because you're learning from yourself.
Yeah, sorry. So we learn from them the role of discovery.
Right.
And we often discount discovery in our own lives and even in mundane aspects of life. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And in one of the ideas is that too much parenting and too much role enforcing and this adversary relationship takes that away from us too, that this is an experience for us to also reconnect with ourselves in a way, in perhaps the closest way possible. But then it comes into you've been talking a lot about outcome and outcome driven society and objective based rules and goals of life, something that I've grappled my own self. I'm in my mid-20s, and I've experienced this clash between thinking I'm working at my dream job, but then I feel empty all of a sudden, so I can't make sense of it.
Yeah.
And we go into life starting from school, society-based rules. How can we engage with people? Saying there's a certain etiquette you need to follow, and then you stumble upon your 25th birthday. You say, dude, why haven't I been doing all my life? What's the point of this? And then some people don't wait until, luckily for me it's 25, right? But for some people it's their midlife crisis, and it's 50 years of just going through the motions. And so how do you, Aaron, connect these two, where we are part of a society, our kids will be part of this game that might be artificial, might be kind of quote unquote fake, lack of a better term, and allowing our kids to really tap into that sense of agency. But when they interact with other kids, they might be the outliers, and even I keep thinking on a scenario where, let's say my kids at school, no, and then one of the other friends or teachers starts enforcing rules on them, and it's an authoritative figure in a way. And so how can we navigate all of this little existential dance that I just mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer, obviously that's a big question, but my simple approach for this is the importance of passions, basically. And I think what you're talking about at age 25 is like, okay, it's how I felt at age 25 is I've gone through the motions. I've done all the schooling. I did my, college and master's program, and I was teaching by the age of 25. And I was pretty into teaching. So I had a passion. But then teaching also had all sorts of troubles with, working with the public school system. And, so then there was lots of conflicts, and then you kind of step back, and, my passion wasn't really firing on all cylinders. And I think with kids, that's the golden opportunity. The golden opportunity, it's hard to find your passion when you're 25 and you got bills to pay and stuff like that, especially if you're 25 and you got college loans to pay off, right? You need to, and rent and whatnot. When you're 15, your parents are covering the rent, the food bill. You don't have any loans. Like, that is the time to discover a passion, in my mind. And a kid with a passion is, like you were saying, what if they, bump into somebody with rules, and, they bump into somebody who's trying to get them to conform with society? A passion is like a superpower. Like the kids that are, obsessed with any of the various things that kids get obsessed with. Usually it's sports, but there's kids that are into the play, kids that are into a musical instrument, kids that are into various things, games. They have like a kind of a basis that they can always return to, and if someone's giving them a hard time, it's in relationship with their passion, and as long as they have access to their passion, then a lot of the other things can be kind of discounted, and you can kind of deal with it. When I'm passionate and I encounter a roadblock, it's like, I can deal with this as long as I see a way to get back to what I want to be doing. It's the kids and the people, the adults that don't have something to come back to, that I think when you bump into roadblocks, you don't have any foundation to kind of retreat to. I think passions are what really give people resilience, and resilience in and of itself is not really actually, I don't think that's a beneficial quality. I think resilience in and of itself is really, blockheadedness, right? Thick-headedness or stubbornness. I just keep on doing this thing, and I don't let any criticism dissuade me from plowing ahead. I don't think about the downside of this. I don't think about how to make it better or to improve it. I just get it done because I need to produce some outcomes, to produce some results that people can judge me by. I think that's a disaster. Whereas a passion, I care about, I don't know, whatever it is, even if it's World of Warcraft, then my resilience answers itself. Someone was giving me an example of, rock climbing. And I saw this video of these like impossible to climb boulders that are inverted, and people spend like years and thousands of times trying to climb this boulder, and then they achieve it, or even if they don't, and no one even asks, how did you have the resolve to stick to that goal? It's like the question is nonsensical because they were just passionate about it, and so that the resilience question becomes irrelevant. And in fact, resilience implies that you're forcing yourself to stick to the goal. And that's a mistake. You don't want to force yourself, just like you don't want to force your kid. You don't want to force yourself. The fact that you need to force it is an indication that there's something wrong here that is fixable. So what is it about, if you want to be a writer, what is it about writing that is making you force yourself to seclude yourself in your, office and give yourself a time limit that you're forcing yourself to write? Right? Maybe you don't have a good topic to write about. Maybe your computer sucks. Maybe, right? On and on and on. Like, these things can be modified and fixed so that you don't have to force yourself. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think resilience is confused. Resilience is great, but it should be in the context of a passion where you don't even have to ask the question of why someone perseveres so much. Like a kid who's obsessed with soccer, you don't ask them, like, why do you just always talk about soccer, and you're watching it on TV and you're playing every chance you get and you always have a soccer ball? How do you know to just, persevere with soccer? It's like, what? That question just answers itself.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That challenges a lot of my assumptions and a lot of my ideas.
Yeah, I don't know what a 25-year-old does. I don't have a recipe for a 25-year-old, but I think it's about passion, and I think about kids.
Yeah.
It's just look at how much of a rules-based childhood it attacks. It's just opposed to kids' passions. And in fact, when a kid is really having fun with something, that raises questions and concerns, right? If a kid is playing video games nonstop, it's like, oh, that's a problem. Whereas, you are seeing them, work through their own interests. That should be, in my mind, that's great. Like, wow, my kid is really into X. It doesn't matter what X is. I want to support that, and support just the very idea that your passions matter. It doesn't matter what they're passionate about. The very fact that you are passionate is important and should be supported. And that's the way that I want you to engage with the world. you know, in other people would see addiction, right? They see compulsion in addiction, but I see someone's interests being fully explored, and there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, and that was exactly my next question. You discussed this a ton in The Sovereign Child, video games and limits on screens, and
Right.
it's, you talk about dopamine, dopamine
Yep.
hits, what kind of dopamine
Yeah.
hits you get from life. And it is interesting because that also challenged a lot of my own assumptions in terms of, how screen time gets, what happens. And when I go to a restaurant and I see a kid with their iPad, I'm like, the first assumption before reading your book
Yep.
was like, they're set for, being glued into their screens all day, which I would love for
Right.
you to expand on how's that been your own experience with your own kids, if that's true or not. I don't want to spoil it, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, Aaron, because how have you been able to discern between, yes, this is a passion my kids are exploring, or this is just a shiny object that's in front of them and it's
Right.
might distracting them from their true passions? Because at the end of the day, yes, I mean, there is like social media, at least for teens and for the rest of us who are not kids, all of them are embedded with casino like techniques to keep you hooked,
Right.
to keep spiking those dopamine hits. And then we're like Skinner, the Skinner experiment. We have the rat pellet, and then,
which is wrong. So yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm loving
We're
it.
we're not in a Skinner box. Like that is part of the, the foundation of this. And I should talk about it for a second for those who don't know.
Yeah.
This is this is I'm just speaking out the philosophy developed by David Deutsch.
Yeah.
And he works from the school of thought of Karl Popper. Karl Popper being a philosopher of the 20th century, very famous, and he's the forgotten philosophy that I reference in the subtitle of the book. And then David Deutsch is contemporary Oxford theoretical physicist who's also wrote this book, The Beginning of Infinity, which is the must-read book that if ever I could recommend a book.
Mm-hmm.
And he explains what a we're talking about screens and so what a person is, and relative to a Skinner box. A person is not a pigeon. A person is not a dog. A person is not a well, we are primates. We're not chimpanzees. We are not even remotely similar to that. All of the rules and all of the principles of dog training and pigeon training do not apply to people. And that is just one of the most fundamental and important consequential concepts, and just a massive point of confusion. When you see a person in a casino pressing a lever, you are not seeing a humanoid dog in a Skinner box or a Pavlovian response. Yes, there is physiology at play, right? We have the same physiology as the dog, right? So we have salivary glands, and we have stomachs and digestive systems and taste centers in our brain and things like that. But what we have that the dog does not have, and the dog doesn't even have an inkling of this. The chimpanzee, the gorilla, the pigeon, none of these non-human animals have even a taste of this, which is we have understanding. We have a model of the world in our minds, and that model is changeable and adaptable. And so we, unlike the dog, we can discover on our own, without anybody training us, we can discover on our own that skydiving is fun. These things that are counter to our genetic programming. We can discover that we like the taste of moldy, rotten milk in the form of cheese, right? And we can, a person can develop a taste. People can self-flagellate, right? They can make themselves physically uncomfortable for religious devotion or for other reasons. There's all sorts of things that people do that are counter to our physiology and our genetic programming. And that's because we are operating on reasons, and dogs don't operate on reasons. Dogs operate on their genetic programming only. And so So when you work with kids in a screen, it's not just a kid who is distracted by a shiny object. It is a person who has reasons for why they are looking at this screen. They are figuring things out too. The screen is only interesting to a person in that it is stimulating their mind and that it's making them think up new ideas and new thoughts. The idea that screens are dumbing people down and are turning our brains to mush is just absolutely wrong. When a kid is looking at a screen, and again, a screen is it a game? Is it social media? Right? Are they talking with their friends? I mean, personally, I've learned a lot about writing from Twitter, and social media. Right? Like there's a lot going on there. If it is social media, are they showing off a picture of themselves doing something daring? Are they sharing a joke? Right? Like, are they interacting with the screen about humor or about physical appearance? Right? And Jonathan Haidt and the screen alarmists don't care about all that, right? They don't care about the reasons. They treat us like pigeons because pigeons don't have reasons. All you care about the pigeon in the Skinner box is whether or not they hit the pellet and what kind of stimulus makes them hit the pellet. But Facebook likes, Twitter likes are not like pellets in a Skinner box. A like from Naval is completely different than a like from me or somebody else.
No, yours would be the same.
Okay, very, very honored. Right. So but as far as the stimulus goes, in terms of the pigeon, it's just a little heart on the screen or not. So we have an understanding attached to all those things, and the screen is what's funny is that the adult viewer of a kid with a screen, we can't see what's going on in the kid's mind. And so the alarmists have us scared that these kids' brains are melting between their ears, even though it's the most preposterous idea with just a moment of thought. Like we use our phones all day long to do work, to interact with our friends, to learn about the world, right? My phone, I rarely even use my laptop. My phone is extraordinary. Like my quality of life is just, I'm talking to you for Christ's sake. So we know that there's a lot going on here, that our brains are not just melting, even though some people convince themselves that they're addicted to their phones. Again, it's complete nonsense.
And I'm excited to also announce that I'm going to open through conversations to a members exclusive section only, where you'll be able to access episodes earlier. I'm going to create so many perks for you that I'm excited for. I wanted to get the best value possible, and I've been thinking on how to do it. I want to give you access to early videos. I want to give you also access to when I record an interview, that you have access real time to just watch while we record, and also to have a live stream, meaning that you can tune in and ask your own questions, your Q&A to some of your favorite guests, and also some of the guests that you don't really know yet, but you would love to hear. And also that way you have some sort of skin in the game as you're supporting the podcast in some way and you're more invested in the success of it. And so I'm excited for this.
And when we look at when a kid is doing a jigsaw puzzle, you can see like, oh, wow, they're struggling to see how the piece fits. I can see what's going on in their head. But when they're watching Peppa Pig, I can't see what's going on in their head. But the kid has to figure out the motivation of all these characters. It's a lot more involved than a stupid jigsaw puzzle. I mean, jigsaw puzzle's great. You enjoy that. That's wonderful. But it is inferior in richness and depth to a children's cartoon. Even the Coco Melon Lemon, the most inane, idiotic drivel that's on YouTube that people are afraid of. A kid has to figure out, what is this character's motivation? Why are they chasing after that character? Why, what is the story here? They're putting together a puzzle in their mind of, thousands of different abstractions and different types of abstraction. Again, there's humor, there's the excitement of a chase, right? There's storytelling, there's all these different things that are going on in any children's cartoon. And I have if your 18-month-old is trying to figure out Peppa Pig, that would be astonishing, right? That would be such an amazing, you'd be so thrilled that your 18-month-old, I mean, obviously some people will be scared that they're watching a screen, but I would be thrilled that an 18-month-old is engaging with this storytelling. And so, it would tell you that something's going on in their mind. But when they're 4, suddenly we think it's just, 4-year-old watching Peppa Pig is just, mind rot. That's crazy. So I'll stop there. I can go on about screens.
No, I love that.
Screens are probably the most for the like tech aware audience.
Yep.
Food drives people nuts, but the screens part just is.
No, it's
I think we're just so confused.
yeah. No, we can keep going on that because it's really that was like I said, and thank you for providing all of the context for our listeners. Is that was the biggest counterintuitive thing because yes, I've been reading since before your book. I've been reading dopamine hits, addiction,
I got
that sort
this
of
book.
thing, and that in itself makes also my own relationship with tech like on a guilt trip. Hey, I'm using
Right.
it too much. But at the other hand, like you say, it's how we use it. When I'm on X,
So let me pause you.
Yep.
Let me pause you. The guilt trip, right? And the idea of policing yourself.
Yep.
Right. I think that is one of, a reason not to police kids is so that they don't grow up to being adults who feel like they need to police themselves.
Right.
And that the same process with your kids is the same process that goes on in your own mind. You don't want some set of ideas to be the authority and to bully and push around other ideas in your own mind. You want to let all of the ideas in your mind have a say and constantly be allowing new ideas to come up and ultimately arriving on explanations that account for all the different things that are going on in your life, to make improvements, and you don't want to privilege one set of ideas at the expense of the others. And the dopamine, right? The making us scared of our own technology is I think a major liability, a major harm that comes from this this thinking. And I'll talk about the dopamine stuff just briefly.
Yeah.
Dopamine is that's part of the physiology, right? So physiology meaning, the structure of the organs and the nerves and the neurotransmitters and how everything in the body is wired together, right? There's the Oreo cookie. The physiology is how your digestive system breaks down the Oreo cookie. And that's going to happen regardless of whatever the reasons are in my head about the Oreo cookie. It's going to go down and the gastric juices in my stomach are going to dissolve it in a certain way, regardless of what I think about it. So the physiology is separate from the mind and the reasons. And so with dopamine is the physiology part of it. It's the hardware part of it. But dopamine is, number one, it's produced with any pleasurable experience. So, right, like think of the most wholesome, pleasurable experience, finishing your book, right? That's dopamine. And are we gonna demonize book writing because it produces dopamine surges? That's crazy. Seeing a long lost friend, a huge rush of dopamine. Is that addictive? That is absolutely crazy. In fact, I would say it's one of the worst things you could do is to make people worried about enjoying enjoyable things in life. Like enjoyment is a good sign. Dopamine surges, and then dopamine is simply the physiology of what's happening for anything that's enjoyable. And so with humans, what's enjoyable depends on our reasons.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So is seeing your brother after not seeing him for years? Well, it depends on what you think about your brother, right? What's your history? How do you guys understand each other, right? Are you long lost close brothers who have been separated, or have you been having a feud and now you're reluctantly forced to be with him at a family reunion, right? The reasons are what matter. Physiologically, he's still, him, and, you're seeing him with your eyes. And so the dopamine does not simply surge when you see your brother after a long time apart. It depends on the reason for being apart for a long time. And right. So it's the reasons that matter. And the dopamine is simply the objective part of it, the part that you can see on a brain scanner or something. But it's irrelevant to the reasons. So all of this dopamine is just fear mongering. I've never heard one of these dopamine people talk about dopamine release for wholesome things. They just it's like I don't know. I don't want to be too pejorative about it, but it does bug me that it's usually psychologists. And it's funny that you have to be a psychologist to be this confused about people, right? To be this dismissive of people's reasons. Psychologists should be the most interested in reasons. And instead, they treat the mind like a black box and they treat us like a Skinner. Even though B.F. Skinner and behaviorism in psychology have been refuted. All that stuff, that's no longer it used to be the canon. Skinner was like the god of psychology, and now it's like, actually, that was a mistake. It's considered like a lost, couple decades. But still, behaviorism is still front and center in psychology. The quickest example is all the stuff about social media and whether it's harmful for kids' mental health. And what do? They treat kids like pigeons, right? They say, okay, we're going to do an experiment. We're going to give you a survey of how depressed or happy are you? What's your self-esteem? What's your mood, right? You answer the survey, then you go use Facebook for 20 minutes, not even that long. And a control group goes and uses the internet without Facebook for 20 minutes, and then they give both groups a survey at the end. And it's like, well, imagine if you did that with the movie Titanic, right? Imagine if you had kids sit down and watch Titanic, teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
and give a survey of their mood before and after watching that movie. I mean, I was depressed for 3 days after watching that movie. I remember just like, it was so profoundly effective. Should we ban the movie Titanic because people get depressed? Should we, what about my dopamine levels after watching that movie? Right? That's got nothing to do with it, right? I felt depressed. That doesn't mean I became depressed.
Mm.
In fact, maybe watching depressing movies helps you vicariously experience emotions like depression and better understand what depression is. So when you break up with a girlfriend, you're like, oh, wow, this is, you can understand that a little bit better, but without, falling off the rails because you've never had any vicarious experiences of romance and breakup and loss. Right. So it's, I'll stop there. I could go on forever. I think,
Please. I mean,
the Titanic example is to show the flaw of behaviorism, the flaw of treating people like dopamine sacks, and it just doesn't make sense. And it's a reasons matter, not dopamine. Reasons drive the dopamine, not the other way around.
Yeah. So I wholeheartedly agree with this, Aaron, and I just want to give you the perspective of what's happening on the 20 to 25-year-old circle that I've been seeing, especially because on my book I do use the example of Skinner. I do mention it.
No.
Yeah. So I'm maybe I have to do a second edition, but the way I use it is, I think it's similar in the sense that I've seen a lot of people, and this goes back into your previous intervention, which is resilience and willpower and discipline, that sort of thing, even though they're hating every single minute of it. And
right.
The sunk cost bias, I've been investing my whole career into this career. I should stick to it,
Yeah.
And so the way I use it on my own book is, I've seen a lot of people get sort of hijacked in a way into virtue signaling on social media platforms, especially LinkedIn, saying after all the blood, sweat, and tears, the hard work,
right,
the suffering, I'm finally able to say that I got a job in McKinsey, or that that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the way I articulate it in my book, and I would love your pushback on it if I'm not making sense, is that I've associated, let's put, my example, because I don't want to also like criticize a lot of people. Let's say if I'm working towards that career at McKinsey or Deloitte or Harvard, whatever, that prestigious status game that a lot of people play, I've associated that suffering, it's only worth it if I get the recognition of people, if I get the likes, and the dopamine hit starts hitting afterwards. The trigger, in the way that I'm saying it, is after I get the likes, it'll all be worth it. But what if I post, let's say I post, and I get just the like of my grandma on social media, on LinkedIn? How would I feel about myself, about the hard work? And that's the way I use the Skinner experiment, if that makes sense.
I mean, disappointment matters. Like, I don't know. You're talking about sacrificing in the short term to achieve something in the long term.
Sort of, yes. But what I'm saying is, a lot of people don't get that, that sense of agency, like you say, or they don't really ask if they're really enjoying it, the things that they're doing, their pursuits. They don't even know their passions, because they didn't have that ability to explore them, like we've been discussing, and they just invested so much time in them, and it's what society rewards. You get that hyping. Yeah, go
It
ahead.
sounds like, I mean, it sounds like a lot like school, right? School is, here is a, right? The trouble with your example, right, is I want to get into McKinsey. I actually don't really care about McKinsey. I care about the prestige. I care about the status. That is a pretty lame goal. And what's even worse than pursuing a lame goal is to sacrifice a lot in order to get it, right? If achieving that goal didn't require a sacrifice, that'd be one thing. That'd just be a waste of time.
Yep.
But to like put yourself through hell in order to get something that sucks, what a complete disaster.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of that's one of the problem with goals. You don't want to be working toward goals because you don't really you have to understand what the goal is, or should understand what the goal is. So what do you understand about actually working at McKinsey? I mean, the classic example, I'm a doctor, and and often, I mean, even myself, I didn't spend a lot of time with doctors when I decided if I wanted to be a doctor. It was more of a guessing of what that is like. And it schools pretty much, that's the framework of school, is that you guess what your life as what is going to be: a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, an engineer, with almost no experience of what that's actually like as a kid. And then you sacrifice all the time in school and class, right? And if you're lucky, you get some enjoyment out of that stuff, and it's inherently interesting, but for the most part, it's not. And it's many years of sacrifice, and then you get the job and you're like, this isn't so great. I mean, that's just such a common thing.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't know, there's a lot to say about it, but it's a disastrous framework for how to live life, to live for the future, especially an unknown future. The flip side would be falling in love with the movies, let's say, and wanting to be an actor, and joining the high school play, right, and joining a theater group, and taking lessons, and loving acting, and doing acting. And so you're not doing what school is, and the usual trajectory is, I do something that's not the thing, it's simulation of the thing, such that I get credentialed as being able to do the thing, and then I switch over and I do the actual thing. Instead, I think we should do the actual thing in amateur version, and keep on building up your expertise that way, and your enjoyment, and that way you can make small incremental changes. And this is one of Popper's biggest ideas, and something I talk about in the book, is that what you want to do is you want to make small incremental changes. You don't want to pick a goal in the far future and then invest a lot in achieving that goal. And it sometimes it does work out, but it's a recipe for disaster, because what your conception of that goal is and what it actually is when you get there are not going to be the same, and you risk wasting your life. It's something that Deutsch tweets about all the time. He recently retweeted something from like 2018. It's that mindset is like a recipe for wasting your life, and it's utopian. And instead, if you do the thing now, and keep on iterating, and then you can deviate, right? If you're into theater, and then you get into like the sound design, and then you get into music, and then music is a way to get into physics, and right, and then into engineering. Like, that's how people who live passionate lives, their trajectory tends to go like that. I got into this, and then I found out about that, and I shifted over to that, and then I discovered this, and I met this person who opened my eyes to this, and that is a much more like this. I wrote this book. It's nothing to do with my day job of medicine. Now I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, podcasting is pretty cool. Recording sound, like, it's just it's much more fun, and you get much better at it, and you don't waste your life along the way. It's life affirming all along the way, and you're never sitting there saying like, what am I doing with my life, right? You never have that. Like, in the middle of med school, I had that a bunch. I'm like, what am I doing? You don't get that. You're just like, I don't know. I don't, you don't find the answer. You're just instead you're wrapped up in what you're doing and the question doesn't even really make sense.
1,000%. And you use a lot of in the book, in The Sovereign Child, you use the word stepping stones, right? And that's like the ideal thing, way of framing life in itself is. And I don't know if people have recommended this book for you, but or maybe you've read it. But Kenneth Stanley's Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned.
Oh, you big hero. Ken Stanley is amazing.
Yeah, like I have
amazing stuff.
A whole chapter about his book in my book, and I've interviewed him, and it really conveyed the way that, how Elvis Presley was, Elvis Presley, he never set his sights into becoming great in itself. He became great because he followed his interest for music. And that's like, it's really trippy for me to talk with you, because you're trying to save a lot of people's life, like kids' life and parents, like saying, start from the first principles of allowing your kids to follow those interests, and that in itself honors their time on earth, and that in itself sets them for success, in the sense that they won't have a second in their lives questioning their decisions and having this back and forth moral compass. Yes, but they told me this is the right way. No, but I feel, and preventing that deferred life plan, of I'm happy now doing podcasting. I'm happy now having these conversations and following my curiosity and reading books and asking people to join me. But you know what? I'm going to save for rainy days. So I'm going to start it in 4 years, while I get the prestigious career. And that's a recipe for disaster in all ways, like you say. I'm just echoing your ideas that I wholeheartedly agree and
yeah. I'm just saying, it's not like you turn into a hippie bohemian and just like, I'm only going to do what I enjoy.
Right.
Because you do need to eat. You do need, like, it matters that I have a comfortable house and I have a nice income. But you put those things into perspective as these are means to an end. And I'm doing two things. One is I am keeping my eye open for the things that I enjoy, and I'm scaling them up as best as I can. And number two, the thing that I'm doing just to pay the bills, that can be improved, right? We kind of just assume like, oh no, I got to put my nose to the grindstone and just get through this, right? That whole resilience garbage. Instead, it's like, what is there a way to make this better? There's always ways to improve things. Again, it's the incremental change. So you're just always keeping your eye open for, oh, I don't like this. And that way you take yourself seriously, right? It's taking children seriously is the name of the philosophy for kids. It's taking yourself seriously as well. It's like, if I don't like something, that matters. It's not me being complaining or petulant or being frivolous. It matters that I do or don't like this. I like Oreos. Like, that matters. Some important part of me likes Oreos. And so I'm not going to just shit on that and give myself a hard time for eating Oreos or wanting Oreos or make some sort of plan about how I'm going to only eat so many Oreos at a certain amount of time or whatever it is. No, just enjoy the damn Oreo. And, and pay attention to the negatives, right? If the Oreos are making you overweight, then like, well, I also like not being overweight. So maybe I can cut back on the Oreos. Or, maybe I could be more physically active to burn off those extra calories. That's what I mean. If you take the things that you like and dislike seriously and try to improve them, it's a much better, I would say, recipe for life than trying to control those things.
100%. And Aaron, I want to ask you on, perhaps this is like we're very deep, so I appreciate that we're deep talking and like practice also, how this looks in practice. But there was one idea that you kind of do explore on the book, of course. Well, that's where I took it from, but the question of consciousness. I have had a lot. Yes, I'm going 0 to 100, even though you say that babies in perhaps some way or some form, when they're crying, it's very interesting, because I've seen a lot of parents how they deal with the crying midnight situations, right?
Yep.
And this boils down into, again, kids. Take kids seriously, and they're going through something. But you also ask on the question of what if they're conscious, on when does consciousness come, where or when comes from. So, getting into the deepest part of the conversation, the more abstract maybe, how does this play out in consciousness and babies crying?
Yeah. So getting, more philosophical. And again, this is the David Deutsch, more explicitly relevant to his thoughts on this and what he's said. And I like this theory the best. I spent a lot of time with theories of consciousness before I came across Deutsch. I was a big Sam Harris fan and big just theory of mind and David Chalmers and all that stuff. And I like Deutsch's, and I can't really defend the details of this, but the basic idea is that the magic, right? What is the magical ingredient that humans have that all the non-human animals don't have, right? Why are we not pigeons, not even a little bit, or dogs, or gorillas, or chimps, or whatever it is? Why do we run on reasons? Might chimpanzees have just kind of dumber reasons, right? Maybe they have just less powerful reasoning capacity, but they have some reasoning capacity, right? When a dog does something interesting and unique, maybe the dog's got something in its mind that it's actually operating on, even if it's not up to a par, right? Maybe a child, maybe a baby, what they say, Peter Singer has, lots of people have these kind of graphs where, an infant is like a chipmunk, and then a baby is like a dog, and then a 3-year-old is like a chimpanzee, and then, right, like the intelligence, you have this intelligence graph, and different animals are on different spots on the graph. It's bullshit. It's humans have it and everything else doesn't. It's not a graph. It's a 0 to 1 thing. That's the theory, at least, that I like out of Deutsch. And why? What do humans have? Humans have creativity. Humans have the ability to guess explanations of what's going on, and operate on those guesses and improve those guesses with new guesses. That's how we got to the stars. Well, we didn't get to the stars. That's how we got to the moon, right? We can guess how birds fly. We can try it like this, try it like that, try it like this, fail, 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 and then eventually we've got an airplane. Nothing else is even on that trajectory. The dolphins will not be flying for eons. The chimpanzees, none of them are making it to the moon. Give them however much time you want. So where do we get this creativity from? That's a deep question. Is there a creativity lobe in the brain? Very interesting. It certainly doesn't appear to be the case. But somehow our brains are able to produce these guesses. And the Deutsch's idea on consciousness, I believe, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, is that what is the, consciousness being the inner light, the sense of what it's like to be something. Where does that come from? And the guess is that creativity and consciousness are part of the same phenomenon. And why is it that the human brain can make conjectures? Really have no idea. And but whatever it is might be also, the answer to that might also be the answer to what is consciousness and how does it work. And a simple idea is that consciousness might be the theater in which we try out our new ideas. Because when you think of a version of an airplane, you kind of guess in your mind, how might that work, right? Whenever you're doing anything, you're guessing in your mind, and you're kind of your mind's eye, you're running through kind of experiments. Like, when you're writing, you're like, how is this sentence? Like, no, this doesn't sound good. Maybe if I modify it like this, I'll modify it like that, right? We can do these iterations in our own minds. We need a kind of inner theater. And I know philosophically, Daniel Dennett, theater of the mind, has all sorts of liabilities. But without going down that road, I think guessing and testing ideas, explanations, that seems to me like something you would use consciousness for. Whereas the chimpanzee is not doing any guessing and testing, so it doesn't need a mind, doesn't need a consciousness. Same thing with free will. You kind of, maybe these are all these are suitcase terms that all go together, that are discoverable. Right now, we really don't have good theories about them, but it's an important thing to find out, to think about. And then for the baby, we don't know when a baby is making guesses, but my guess would be whenever a baby is making conjectures, that's when a baby is conscious, and that may be happening before they're born. And so not knowing anything about it, you might as well treat all babies like they are conscious. Statements that they're not conscious are just as much guesswork as statements that they are conscious. I certainly could be wrong, but I would hate to be, what I say in the book, I would hate to assume that they're not conscious and find out that they're crying in the middle of the night is them suffering, consciously suffering. I'd rather be wrong in my case where I assume my babies are conscious and treat them that way. And if it finds out that it was just a waste of time, so be it. I would much rather make that mistake.
And it's just wild to think, we're consciousness and we're all of this infinite possibility. And like you say, we're boiling ourselves down to just mechanistic, situations or mechanistic laws. That they might play a role, but like you say, they're not the essential, crucial part. And how I'm thinking, in the future when I have my family is just seeing that beacon of consciousness just emerge, and how to honor it in the best way possible. And just with your ideas, I think I'm close to it, because freedom above all else, in the sense not reckless freedom, we've discussed about it, treating them as I would treat my own partner, my own friends, and taking away that common notion that we have to be rivals with them. It's like you're accountable to me.
Battle. You have to pick your battles.
Exactly. It's like a battle, and it's wild. It's wild to think of it that way. It's because it is the status quo. It is how people, generally see how they should raise their kids. And I want my kid to be, you might push back in my way of articulating, but I want them to be like my best friend in the trust sense of self. That word. And I have a ton of questions still, but I'm being aware of your time, Aaron. I know we're past the cutoff, so maybe just one or.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Going into that rant, I wanted to get like more practical.
I love ranting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And well, it's not practical actually. It's even deeper. It relates to what you said about free will. It was going to be like my follow-up question. I've hosted a lot of tech experts. Probably you won't agree with some of them. Privacy experts, that sort of thing. And one of the biggest questions I ask them is, if we have an enhanced or a decreased free will in an age where, I have my Apple Watch. My Apple Watch gets a ton of data from me. Of who I am, what nudges me in my interests, and we're giving that data, our kids, if they use their iPads and whatnot, they're giving that data as well. And so, how does this modern dance of like free will, if Sam Harris doesn't believe there is, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, but do you think in modernity, like, are we setting our kids to explore that yes and no? Again, this goes back into technology, so bear with me. But are we enhancing their abilities to make sense of the world, even though it feels like there is a big push, for this data retrieving and just push ads to people and just sell them things and just, everything's money. So that's my whole spiel.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with money.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with pushing things to people, advertisements of things that they might like. I mean, I'm happy to be advertised to. I don't want advertisements to interrupt when I'm watching Seinfeld.
Exactly.
So I'll pay money not to be interrupted. And but I do like that algorithms are trying to show me what that think I might like. I watched something on JFK assassination, right? I like that the YouTube algorithm's like, oh, here's this person. Oh, here's this person. Oh, here's this person. And it's obviously up to me to click on that or not. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a slave to the algorithm. Like, I know, I trust my own interests. It's just hilarious to me that this is seen as a bad thing and some sort of corruption of free will, and that somehow we're suddenly being controlled by the algorithms. The algorithms do not control us, not even in the slightest. There is, our interests control us, which are driven by our own reasons. And, lots of things are boring to lots of people. If the algorithm was so successful, then it would have everybody in lockstep. And obviously people are disagreeing plenty. And they believe all sorts of wacky bullshit, which is the point, right? Like the wacky bullshit proves that you can't control people, right? You give them one narrative about Biden or Trump, and half the country's like, that's crazy, right? So these companies are very, very wealthy. They have a lot of money. That's great. That means they're really good at making the tech work really well. They made this beautiful podcast interface. Awesome, right? They're feeding on our dopamine right now. I mean, I'm getting a major dopamine rush for this whole thing. Riverside podcasting app, right? I'm more inclined to use them in the future, right? I mean, come on, this is how the world works. You push people. It's called a marketplace. You push your wares toward potential customers, and they decide if they like it or not. And if you lie about that, right? If you lie about the Apple Watch, if you're using deceitful advertising, well, people are not going to buy the Apple Watch. When you buy an Apple Watch and it doesn't do what you think it's going to do, you're like, this thing sucks. It doesn't matter what the ads are. The advertisements that work are true. They're honest, right? It's like advertising is this manipulative thing. They're like, no, it needs to reveal. A BMW ad needs to have some fidelity to what the BMW actually is. And that's why it's an iconic brand. That's why Apple is an iconic brand. It, like, when you pick up the phone, like, damn, it's kind of similar to what it looked like on the ad, right? And I don't know, I can go on and on. Trying to go philosophically deep with the free will bit.
Yeah.
We are constantly, if we didn't have free will, if we could be controlled by the algorithms, then we would be in lockstep. They would have figured out the one social media app. I mean, Facebook just offends my aesthetic taste. Something about Facebook I can't stand. The Facebook ecosystem, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, I can kind of get it a little bit, but I have no desire to download the TikTok app. I'm totally open to it. I'm not afraid of it at all. It's just, I don't want to watch. I like longer form things. My wife doesn't like any of this stuff. My parents, right? Like, what are we dreaming here? Do you think that every single person on the planet is addicted to Twitter? Most people don't use Twitter. Most of the people who do use Twitter, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested. They use it for all sorts of different reasons. There's people that are really into comedy. I mean, that's one thing. Like, what about people that just use social media for comedy and just want to see funny cat videos? There's a lot of people that are like that. That is completely different from reading about JFK or Trump or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever Elon's doing. Like, why? It seems like we're so prone to just reducing all this down and simplifying it into these buckets that don't at all reflect the fecundity of the human mind. And it's just a screen. Instead of it's Netflix, it's social media, it's YouTube, it's a drawing app, a gaming app. No, it's just a screen, and that's all it is. And the kid is just a pigeon. Like, that is, it's a little offensive.
Yeah.
It's I think what Deutsch would say is it's dehumanizing. It is discounting the magic of personhood, which is the creativity and conjecturing explanations, and just saying, like, no, all you're doing is, I know what you're doing. All you're doing is eating junk food because the food company has hijacked your evolutionary predisposition to fats and salts and sugary sweets from our, ape ancestors, and, you are just being led around by the nose. It's like, no, I like Oreo cookies. There's people that like Oreos that don't like gummy bears, and they like gum, and they like cake. I mean, I don't like icing on cake, but I like donuts. I mean, all I'm saying is, the data's great. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been hacked. It seems to me if someone's going to try to hack my bank account, that's something I'd be worried about. But I think Google is very interested in preventing its customers from having their bank accounts hacked. I'm happy to trust Google and Amazon and Twitter to try to prevent all that stuff. I don't get it. You can have my data, my user data, like, take it. And again, it's not unique to tech companies. Every television had Nielsen ratings. There used to be, I don't know much about this, I should learn more about it, but they used to send out surveys on people, and they would either pay them to fill out the surveys of what they like and what they buy, or people would like to do it just for fun. They would fill out all these surveys. They used to do phone surveys and ask you what you watch on TV, and right. And like, this is how entertainment industry figures out what is entertainment. It needs to get more feedback. It's not to control us. It's just fear mongering. And again, it's not even just fear mongering. It's a little insulting. It's like, we are just, it's this view of people as apes. We're just unthinking animals led around by the nose, even though the same people will worry that, how many Americans are obsessed with conspiracy theories and, QAnon and, all the nonsense from Trump, et cetera. It's like, so you're worried that we are, believing all these crazy things. We're not all agreeing on one kind of unified truth. And you think we're all manipulated by the algorithm. Like if we're,
Yeah. I get it. What I meant with data is
sorry.
no, it's great because I'm loving this because you're breaking a lot of conceptions about a lot of things, and it's misconceptions rather. It's great, but with data in itself, maybe another one that you can shatter now is if they have access to my preferences starting from 10 years old, 15 years old. They have like a customer for life, and the pushback from your end would be, okay, great, I'm loving the company, keep pushing. Yeah. On the other hand is maybe the motivation in itself, while I agree money is not bad, but it boils down to that balance sheet. It's just, this is a customer, this is it. They also in themselves are kind of like boiling down humans to just a profit sense of things,
which is good. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with having customers. Like, money is a great way to exchange value. How do I indicate that what you're doing for me is valuable? I give you my money. Mm-hmm. Like, that's wonderful. And we all use the same currency so that we all know that, like, oh, wow, it's how you have a marketplace. It's how you have prices. It's how capitalism runs. It's how we get the modern world. Like, this is wonderful. I don't care if I'm Twitter's customer. I'm Twitter's advertiser's customer. I'm the product? Like, okay, fine. I don't care. I like the service that Twitter provides me, and I really don't care. I really don't care how they make their money. You don't have to be honest with me. I just, it's just, what can I say that's intelligent about this? There's nothing wrong with making money.
Yeah.
Through advertising.
But if they sell, like, just last one on this topic is,
yeah, go ahead.
If Aaron, that like if they tell you explicitly, which they do under terms or conditions, they say, we are going to sell your data to insurance companies, data brokers, that sort of thing, to evaluate whether or not we should raise your premiums or just box you into, this category of person and risk assessment, and then just decline your credit ask, let's say.
How else are insurance companies going to know how much your premium should be?
Well, I don't really like the way I see it is
like, let's say a car insurance company,
yeah.
Right? The premium that they charge would vary depending on how risky the driver is.
Right.
So how do they figure out how risky the driver is? Like, what's a wholesome way of doing it? Right? They come and interview you, mm-hmm. Right?
But it's surveillance.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
What if they contract with Google, and they're like, we've found that people who are interested in these things are more likely to have car accidents than people that aren't. That would only work if those correlations were true, right? If people who tended to look at certain videos,
yeah.
Were more likely to have car accidents, then that would make sense, right? Their premium should be higher. I mean, is anybody walking around feeling like their insurance premium is too high because of the like the data that Google is? It feels like I'm just a paranoid. I mean, I don't know what else is a harmful scenario. Insurance premiums might go up. Okay, what else? Like,
Well, privacy too, in a way. If I'm going into
totally, yeah. So privacy. If you want privacy, don't get off the fucking internet.
That's true.
I don't get that. Why is everybody else responsible for my privacy?
Mm.
Like it is if I want privacy, if I really care, I'll buy an iPhone and I'll use an iPhone in a secure way and I'll read up on Apple and iPhone and do that. And if I don't care about privacy, I'll just be a Twitter idiot like me. Like it's my job
Yeah.
to manage my own privacy, and using the internet is not a good way to do that.
Yeah. It's just, it sometimes feel like it's a Trojan horse strategy. Like they don't tell you that this is going to be the trade-off that you're going to make. You're going to be able to connect with Aaron through X. I love X, so sorry to hate on it. I'm not hating, it's just social media example.
Yeah.
Because I did connect with you through X. So
Yeah.
but the hidden costs of it is all of the aftershocks, and it feels like, again, it's a manipulation game. That's the whole thing. Like it's not being truthful that, hey, Alex, log into this, but be ready. We're gonna know everything and anything about you and your interests, and for the foreseeable future.
So they don't know everything and everything. Yes, it would be nice if they're more transparent, perhaps. But on the other hand, I don't care about it. I don't want to. I hate the pop up about the cookies, and I like stop nannying me about how I use the internet. Like if I care, I'll read the terms and services. Most people don't care. For you who do care, I'll be like, oh, I got tricked. Like, what do you mean you got tricked? Like, welcome to the internet. Like, this is not news. No, I think it's people's responsibility. You're talking in public. Like,
Yeah.
Twitter is like, everybody says, you don't send an email that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper or on a billboard. Like the internet is a billboard. Like you're writing on the billboard. Like, oh no, I thought it was going to be private. I thought the app wasn't going to talk to any of the other apps, even though I do like it when it grabs my photos so I can post a photo. And I do like it when, Google knows my calendar, and like, Spotify knows which kind of music I like, so I like this, but I don't like that. I'll just jump in the pool with both feet. And if people that don't like to do that, I totally get it. If it creeps you out, but that's on you to figure this out. You can't be Mr. Privacy and expect everybody else to hold your hand. Like, that's
true. Aaron, I've 100% believe we can have, like you just saw, your book, which is The Sovereign Child. Not only does it open, ideas on how to raise my future kids, but just the whole conversation we've had, I believe it's deeper than that. It's not just practical self-help. This is how you.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about kids at all. I'm impressed.
And it's part of it. It's a whole philosophy which I deeply appreciate on your writing. You and your ideas. I hope really to host you again soon.
Great.
It
feels
feels like
again. This is so fun. We got a lot more to talk about.
100%. It feels like we could speak to so many ideas. And I hope I did justice to your book. I do hope that people do get to read it and see deeper beyond than just this is how you should, or this is how you shouldn't, or that sort of thing. It's more like, I'm gonna be a bit cheesy. That's my weakness or strength, is that you're asking us, future parents or parents, and just people all together, to just allow our kids to have a fighting chance to really unleash their creative potential. And that in itself is a positive sum game for us. If my kid is a creative genius, he's gonna or she's gonna create unlimited prosperity for everyone, and it's a win. It rather than just boxing them to all of what we discussed, that Skinner, that baboons, chimpanzees evolve.
Although I want to add one thing.
Yeah.
It's also one thing I kind of I wish I did in the book. It's also absolutely great if your kid is just a normal, regular,
Yeah.
shut-in person who doesn't really contribute to the world, like a lot of this is about achieving excellence and everything like that, but also just like having a normal life is absolutely great. And there's no such thing as I shouldn't say like a shut-in, as if the human is such a rich being
Yeah.
that even a modest, more constrained life is still extraordinarily rich, and I'd be totally no problem. I think a little bit of the discussion of this often works into how do I make my kids be
Yeah.
high achievers.
Yeah.
But go ahead, yeah.
No, 100. I mean, it's to unleash their own potential, to allow them to
Exactly.
explore their own humanity in whatever way it is. It's not
Yes.
falling into the trap of my own conceptions of what greatness should be like. This is how my kids should
Right.
unfold. I wasn't a baseball.
Exactly. Kenneth Stanley, exactly.
Exactly.
We don't even want to say like what our general like achievement level for our kids is. Like we don't want to even plan that.
Exactly. 100%. And also, if I wasn't a baseball player and that was my dream, I shouldn't put that into my kids, you know. They need to become the baseball player. They need to live I need to live my dream through them. And so this is just to say that you're inviting the conversation to just explore our kids as serious individuals, as sovereign individuals, as you know, their own person, and allow them to be a guide to their own journey in this reality. So, Aaron, I can't thank you enough, and I do hope to host you sooner than later. And thank you. I'll be keeping track and following of all of your ideas as I've been doing.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. So fun to talk.
Thank you.